Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandria Russell, and I am the Postdoctoral Fellow for the Scarlet and Black Project here at Rutgers University. Wow, we have had an amazing 2 days of panels, a fantastic keynote address by President Holloway, and now it is my pleasure to welcome you to the last session of our virtual symposium, The Legacy of Scarlet and Black. All of our Zoom webinar sessions will be recorded, and we have closed captioning and a live transcript available at the bottom of your screen. Don't forget to let us know where you're joining us from in the chat, and remember to enter any questions that you have in the Q&A box. Both are available at the bottom of your screen. And we are looking forward to continuing our lively discussion. So you'll have the opportunity to unmute your microphone and ask your questions directly to our co-chairs. We are also proud to announce that we have started the Scarlet and Black Project Book Fund to support diverse students throughout Rutgers University. We will be placing more information about how you can donate in the chat, and you can always visit our website, scarletandblackproject.com. Before we begin our conversation this evening, I'd like to introduce Micah Clyte, Director of Rutgers University Press, for some opening remarks.
Hi, thank you, Alexandria. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for inviting me to give a couple of quick remarks about the legacy of Scarlet and Black, and also the work of putting out the 3 volumes and the other work involved in this long-term project. I'm the director of the press, and I've been here just over 5 years. And I was born in Philadelphia, which was close enough to New Brunswick to know about the university, but just far enough away so that when I arrived, I really knew that I had quite a bit to learn about the place, the city, the history of the university, and its place in America. And that education ties in nicely with Scarlet and Black and the other really powerful educational projects that have been kind of concomitant with this work that's been redefining our memory and our history. So about 2 months after I started here at the press, Dick Edwards came down to my office, described the work of the Committee on Enslaved and Disenfranchised Populations in Rutgers history, and that one of the results of its efforts was to be a book, a report that he wanted to turn into a book. And he asked me if I'd be interested in publishing it. And of course, I jumped at the possibility and the opportunity. And he said, great, but we need it in 6 weeks. And so those of you in attendance who are scholars in your own right and have worked with publishers of any size knows that 6 weeks is about as close as you can get to light speed in publishing. But we got it done. And he very quietly said, do me a favor and just make sure that you call it Scarlet and Black, A History of Enslaved and Dispossessed People at Rutgers, Volume 1. And I said, does that mean there's going to be other volumes? He said, don't worry about it, but there will be. And there were. And learning that we could get this done quickly and get it done with the really solid and strong and enthusiastic support of Dick and the university was really the best education I could have for what the university stands for, but also in the university's efforts and commitment to rebuild the memory of how the university came to be. And none of this would have been possible without that kind of commitment, without the work of scholars, without the work of graduate students, without the work of the library and archives and the rich resources the university has. And I'm very grateful that we were entrusted with the task of publishing Scarlet and Black, and very proud to have all 3 volumes now out. And I actually want to thank Dick really deeply for his trust, and to President Holloway and the new administration for their continued support. And I also want to really thank Dr. Deborah Gray-White, Dr. Marisa Fuentes, Dr. Mia Carey, and Dr. Kendra Boyd for editing all these volumes, and for all the students, researchers, historical work that was done in putting this all together and making these books really help make the story of what Scarlet and Black is telling and documenting come alive. And in that sense, I do like to say, when people ask what the press does, I like to say that our job is to tell the story of the university. And in the case of Scarlet and Black, I'm even happier to say that we are instruments in service to Rutgers in telling its own story. And beyond that, that Rutgers is now able to tell a really deeply important part of the story of America, and in a way that's deeper and richer for having this work and the continuing scholarship that this project has brought about. So I really thank you all very much, and I'm really very grateful to be a part of this, and very excited to see maybe the volumes come to a conclusion, but the work of the committee and the work of Scarlet and Black go on. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for those remarks. Really appreciate that. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our illustrious co-chairs of the Scarlet and Black Project. I'll start with Dr. Deborah Gray White, who is a Board of Governors Distinguished Professor of History at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, New Jersey. She is author of Aren't I a Woman? Female Slaves in the Plantation South, Too Heavy a Load, Black Women in Defense of Themselves, 1894 to 1994, several K-12 textbooks on United States history, and Let My People Go, African Americans, 1804 to 1860s. Her edited work, entitled Telling Histories, Black Women in the Ivory Tower, is a collection of personal narratives written by African American women, historians, that chronicle the entry of Black women into the historical profession and the development of the field of Black women's history. Freedom on My Mind, A History of African Americans, a co-authored college text, is in its third edition. As a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C., and as a John Simon Guggenheim Fellow, White conducted research on her newest book, Lost in the USA, American Identity from the Promise Keepers to the Million Mom March. She holds the Carter G. Woodson Medallion and the Frederick Douglass Medal for Excellence in African American History. Welcome, Professor White. Dr. Marisa Fuentes is the author of Dispossessed Lives, Enslaved Women, Violence, and the Archive, which won awards from the Association of Black Women Historians, Berkshire Conference of Women Historians, and the Caribbean Studies Association. She is also the co-editor of Scarlet and Black, Volumes 1 through 3, and the Slavery in the Archive special issue in the History of the Present from November 2016. Fuentes' most recent publications can be found in Small Acts, English Language Notes, and Diacritics. Her next project will explore the connections between racial capitalism, the transatlantic slave trade, and the disposability of Black lives in the 17th and 18th centuries. Recent support of this work comes from Oxford University, the McNeil Center for Early American Studies, and the Library Company of Philadelphia. She has served a number of professional organizations, including as council member for the Omohundro Institute of Early American History and Culture, secretary for the Berkshire Conference of Women Historians, and is a distinguished lecturer for the Organization of American Historians. Welcome, Professor Fuentes, and really welcome to you both. It is an honor to be here with the two of you tonight, and I am really looking forward to the conversation. To start us off, I thought it'd be nice for our audience to know, how did you begin your work with the project? What are the origins of your participation in the project?
Well, I guess maybe I should start. To be honest, I like to tell this story because it was like, I was walking my dog and I got a phone call. And it was Karen Stubis, who was then, and I forget her position, but she said, "Well, you must know why I'm calling." And I said, "No, I really have no idea." She said, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "No, did you read your email?" And I have to confess that I sometimes let administrators' emails go by without reading them. In any case, they had announced this committee on the enslaved and disenfranchised in Rutgers history. And they basically said what the committee was going to do and what it was about. Obviously, they at that time did not announce a chair of it because Stewis was calling me to ask me if I would chair. And so it kind of took me by surprise. After giving it a lot of thought, And particularly, let me say this right now before I forget. I took it up with one of my besties, Dr. Cheryl Wall, who the third volume is dedicated to. I talked to her about it at length, and we decided that I should do it. That's the way we often did things when we were asked to do things at Rutgers. We would consult each other, and we would give each other the pros and cons, and mostly everything came down the pros. So I said I would do it, and when it was announced that I was going to be the chair, I have to say I had nothing but people volunteering to help me. And I think that's also the way that Professor or Marisa got involved in it.
I'll just echo that. I mean, as soon as I heard about the project, and particularly its focus on the colonial period and slavery, is something that I am interested in my own work. I wanted to be a part, and I asked Deborah, how could I help? And she quickly gave me an answer, but unknowingly at the time, for both of us, really, that this was going to sort of develop into a huge project with multiple volumes that I didn't know about. But before we go on to the next question, I just wanted to say in my opening remarks, I neglected to thank some very important people, and I just wanted to take the time. One of them is Chancellor Malloy, who inherited this project and from the beginning, without hesitation, offered the support that the project needed to see itself through to the third volume. Dr. Kristen O'Brazel-Colfin, our public historian, who really initiated many of the public history parts of this project, including campus tours and the app. And also, really importantly, as she spoke to in the first panel today, reaching out to the community and building community stakeholding in the project. And a huge thank you to Peter Miklas and Michael Kleit and all the folks at Rutgers Press who pushed these books out in the way that they did and so quickly. And I would be remiss, I want to say this, particularly as we talk about the third volume, we would not have the third volume in our hands right now if it was not for Professor Deborah Gray White. And I have to say this because every time a volume was coming into that critical moment of having to push it out and edit and copy edit, I was trying to take a leave to recoup the time from the last volume that we gave. And every time, she would say, we need to get this out. So it was particularly critical. I was in Oxford, it was COVID. I didn't know I would only get 8 weeks on this fellowship in Oxford. And she said, yeah, we got to do this. And I dragged my feet in terms of timing, but you can't say no to Professor White. And I'm so thankful to have had you as an example and a mentor through this whole process. So wow. I just wanted to thank you for that.
Well, in that regard, I want to thank you for just stepping up and volunteering. I am not a specialist in the colonial period. And if you all note, the word dispossession appears in the title of that volume. And a lot of that, a lot about dispossession we learned from Marisa, from you and your book on dispossessed, enslaved women in Barbados. So I want to thank you for all of your work. And I will say too that in so many ways, COVID made this book, this third volume, possible. Because as Marisa says, she was in Oxford doing research, and the fact that she had to come home and could not continue to to complete the work that she was doing, and that she had all this time. And I kept saying to her, hey, we can do this. You can't do this, but if we finish the third volume and we put all of our time and energy into it and we get it done by the time Rutgers opens back up, and then by the time you're actually able to get back to your own work, then this will be off the table. And it was really hard given everything that was going on, and the way we were all feeling, given that COVID was stealing our lives. And it also was about the time that we lost Dr. Wall, Cheryl Wall. And in so many ways, doing this work helped me keep my mind off of that loss, because it was tremendous, not just for me, but for Rutgers.
Yes, it was absolutely. But I love that our third volume is dedicated to Dr. Wall, and it speaks to kind of the breadth of the project, and that it is, about the community. It's community centered, and it's about so many different things. But I want to talk a little bit more about the books themselves, the scholarship of the project, because we have published 3 books in 5 years, less than 5 years. That's a monumental task. So I'd like for you to kind of talk about how you were able to accomplish that, and really what is the meaning, or the significance rather, of the scholarship of Scarlet and Black.
Marisa, you want to tackle that one first?
Sure. I think what the last 2 days have really shown is the impact of the work of understanding how people struggled, how they were excluded from this institution, how they fought for inclusion, benefits us all. I was thinking particularly about the last panel, who those student activists made it possible for us all to be here, right? Through the sacrifices they made. But I also think that we accomplished this in such a short time because of all the people on this project and all the help that we had. And the graduate students, mostly in history, but we had a sociology student and a School of Ed student. I mean, they worked full time in the summer to do the research, right? And to go into the archives, and to pull together a narrative. It's hard work. And the first volume was like a needle in the haystack to try to find any trace of enslaved people. The other volumes, perhaps there was tons more archival work, archival documents available, putting that together. That they did a phenomenal job. And we wouldn't really have been able to do it on our own in that way. So I wanted to add that.
So actually in the chat, Dr. Felicia McKenty talks about the deliverables, because she and I had not met, but during our first conversation, she said to me, can you really deliver on this? And maybe I'm not supposed to say that out loud, but I said, yeah, we can do this. We can do this. But I want to underscore what Marisa just said. And I've been, as a senior partner in this relationship, I've been at Rutgers for a very long time, and I've been in academia for a very long time. And I do know that often when you see 2 Black women turn out 3 books in 5 years, it's just like, oh, no biggie. That's what Black women do. Black women, we're super women, and in some ways, you're right. 3 books and actually it was not 5 years. It was really more like 4.5. So I just want everyone to know, and for those who might be from other universities who are looking to undertake this work, we worked on this all the time. And our graduate students worked on it all the time, even though they had their own publishing things that they had to do, and they're making it through graduate school, and they want to get their degrees, and yet, we provided incentive by paying them to do the research, but at the same time, um, they worked really hard, and this was something that took, at least as far as I was concerned, a good deal of my waking hours. So I just want everyone to know that this was hard, that this kind of research and writing and editing is not easy. And this third volume really tasked us and challenged us because the Rutgers is just Rutgers is a bureaucratic mess. And trying to understand how Rutgers expanded both across the river and then up to Newark and down to Camden, and integrating that with the story of the Black Revolution on campus. This took an awful lot of work. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. So 3 volumes in 4.5 years. It took an incredible amount of time, but I will also underscore the fact that we have really talented students, many of whom are now assistant professors. So we can speak volumes about the excellence of our graduate program. And then Alexandria, yourself, and Dr. Jesse Baker. I mean, everybody gave us their best, and we can't forget it, and we want to acknowledge it every single time we can. And also, the university put out some money on this. I think the capital outlay on this project, I won't, Marisa and I several times added it up, and we said, okay, let's not tell them. Am I right? Let's not tell them because, I don't think that the humanities and the social sciences get this kind of money to do these kinds of projects. I think it's pretty standard in STEM. They pay their researchers. They're just on a totally different level. But in the humanities and in the social sciences, we don't always get this kind of support. But every single time we ask for more money to either support the postdocs or to support editors, to support, because we did hire an outside editor for the third volume, even though Marisa and I both did a lot of editing. We thought, my goodness, we just can't get this out unless we hand it over to someone else. But every single time we asked the university for funds to support this project, they came through. Again, I've been at Rutgers for a long time, and that's not always been the case.
Absolutely. And, one of the things you mentioned is, other universities looking to do this work. But I'd like to know, since so many different universities are taking up this mantle of studying their institutional history, many times in relation to slavery, how does our project kind of fit into this national movement that's happening of these universities studying slavery initiatives?
Well, I would say a couple things about that. I mean, we joined the Universities Studying Slavery Consortium pretty early on. It was initiated by UVA, but because of the work that we had done, thought it would be great to be in partnership and to talk about best practices and to learn from other universities. We attended conferences. And really got to know some of the workings of the other projects. But because we moved forward in time, I think that sets us apart. in many ways. And that forward movement means that we're not just talking about the legacy of slavery specifically, but its afterlife, right? The persistence and reproduction of anti-Black racism, Jim Crow, exclusion, students not being able to attend, not having the financial resources to attend, but also something that we don't often, at least we didn't get to talk about in the first volume, is really just the activism of the students, right? So that the other universities haven't yet, as far as I know, really done this expansive project that we have, and published books with press, right? That does cover this entire history. And so it's a holistic project. I obviously would love, I think we scratched the surface around slavery and the history of slavery, and our archives at Rutgers are begging for more work. So I'm hoping that spurs students and researchers to come do that work with us, or to do their own work. But I do think that we have both been involved in that conversation with slavery and historical markers, and thinking about the sort of colonial legacy of this campus, but that this other contemporary work actually brings us to the present in very important ways, that the struggle, against anti-Black racism is ongoing, and the issue of inclusion is ongoing. And so this third volume really does show that work.
Mm-hmm. I don't really have anything to add to that. I think you've covered it, the answer.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I have to say, when I first became a postdoc for the Scarlet and Black Project, I was just blown away by the student involvement and participation. I mean, the project, beyond its kind of scholarship on the front end, on the back end, it's given so many opportunities to early career historians like myself, to graduate students. We even have had undergraduate students contribute both to the volumes and the digital archives. So, I'd like to kind of hear you talk a little bit about the significance of all the student contributions to the project, and how the project has helped to cultivate a new generation of historians at Rutgers and throughout the country, with so many people becoming assistant professors, even in this year.
I have to say that I came through academe at a totally different time, where there were no Black professors. My first Black professor I met, actually the very first Black professor that I met, was Darlene Clark Heim, who, as many of you know, is a specialist in African American women's history. And this was after I received my PhD. And I had a very difficult time getting my my dissertation published. And even though my dissertation has turned out to be a blockbuster, so to speak, in the world of history, it just barely escaped the trash can, just barely, because the gatekeepers said this work on African American slave women is just, it's not telling us anything we don't already know. But so, I mean, after getting through it, really, it made such an impact on me that, I almost didn't make it to this point. And in fact, I studied for the LSATs any number of times, saying, okay, I'll be an attorney as opposed to a historian. And I also had, actually, at the time that my dissertation got accepted for publication, which was right before tenure, I had an interview scheduled at the Nuclear Regulatory Administration. A friend of mine who worked there had got me an interview. And I say all that to say that I really felt that it was very important for me to pay it forward. I tell my graduate students now, don't thank me for anything, just pay it forward. Because I do want them to remember that, they had help. And that nobody turned their back on them and said their work wasn't worthy. And I have always felt that every single time that I get a chance to help a graduate student or to even help a young assistant professor, and I have the time and I can do it, I want to help them. So in terms of asking for support of our graduate students. I mean, I know what it means to go on the job market and publish material. It puts you ahead of the pack. I know what it means to go to not really have enough money or to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches so that you can pay your tuition or so that you can survive. So for me, it is almost automatic. I always try to look, and I mean, I know that it may sound like I'm tooting my horn, but when I'm saying this just to make sure that other people out there realize that one has to be intentional and one has to be deliberate about paying it forward, because it's not going to happen unless you really decide, okay, I've come this far, but I'm going to pull others along. The National Association of Colored Women, what, lifting as we climb? That was their motto. I really think that one has to always do what one can to help others that are coming up to get through.
Absolutely. And I'm certainly grateful for your mentorship and leadership during my tenure here as well. We will shift a little bit to questions in the Q&A, but I do want to ask both of you, the project is so expansive. It has so many different aspects. So I'd like to know kind of what's your favorite thing, or what do you love most about the project? And perhaps what don't you like about the project, or, want to improve on in the future?
Come on, Marisa.
Let's see. I think I speak for both of us, all of us, that we're really proud that of the quality of the scholarship, of the publications. I'm absolutely floored by the digital work that Jesse and you have been involved in. It is phenomenal to look at. It's something I could never do, and so I'm just thrilled and excited about all the tendrils that have come from this work. I think rather than say dislike, I would say challenges. What was the most challenging about this was that there was points at which I missed my own work. And getting back to that. And once you take a break from your work, it's hard to get back into it. So I'm working on that now. And I'm looking forward to, shifting gears and putting closure on this. And hopefully, doing some other stuff, I'll say.
So what I liked most, actually, I looked at a lot of this stuff as a jigsaw puzzle. Like I look at, particularly with volume 3, how to put things together. In volume 3, I had to do some of the research, to fill in some of the gaps, as did Marisa. But it is always a challenge to me to take a piece of work. I actually do like, as much as I say I don't, I do like editing, but the part of editing that I like is to take a piece and to figure it out and see what's missing or what's in the wrong place, and to move things around and to organize things. That is something I I think doing that with all 3 volumes, but particularly with volume 3. At the time, it's awful. You have this feeling like, okay, there's something wrong with it. It's not. But when you get it and you see, oh, it's coming together, that's something that I didn't like. That I liked. With volume 3 in particular, I liked reading the stories of the alumni and what happened, because that's my generation. So as I was going, I was like, okay, I was doing this. I went to Binghamton University. At the time, it was the State University of New York at Binghamton, or Harper College. And, I was doing the same thing. I was organizing the Black Student Union and the Afro-Latin Alliance, and sitting in to demonstrate for Black studies. And so, I'm like, oh wow, look at this. This is like really, this is really really fascinating. What I didn't like, to be honest, the pressure. I felt an incredible amount of pressure. I had told people that I could deliver, that we would deliver. I felt my name was going to be attached to this. And in some ways, when you say yes to doing a published book, and the research hasn't been done, the editing hasn't been done, nothing. You just really, and you say yes, I'll do it. That's almost like setting oneself up for failure. But I was just determined, but the pressure, 24/7, it never really went away. So, and getting this thing out, and maybe Marisa, and I apologize. I'm doing this in public for any pressure that I transferred to you to try to let's get this thing done. But that's a lot to have on one's shoulders, because I think it's easy. I'm aware of being Black and female in predominantly white institution. I know what it means. Okay, well, she said she was going to do it, but she didn't. She didn't come through. That was not something I ever wanted anybody to say about me. So for the last 4.5 years, I've lived with an incredible amount of pressure, and I'm really glad now that that pressure has lifted.
I wanted to just add, I remember what I disliked about it. The 20th century. I'm looking forward to going back further.
Yeah. Well, I just really appreciate your openness, your honestness, your honesty about the process, because this is such a fruitful conversation about how to manage a project of this magnitude, because it certainly has grown into a colossal project. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'll save kind of our a question for the end. But we do have with us Peter Michaelis, who has been a joy to work with at Rutgers Press. He has a question, and I believe his mic is unmuted. And so, Peter, feel free to ask your question.
Sure, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, first of all, congratulations. And I should say, I'll echo what Micah said. This has been just an honor for us to work with you guys on this landmark project. And that really is sort of my question. This is a landmark project. I feel as if this should be front page New York Times news. We've read about in recent years what other universities have done, and Georgetown perhaps in particular, we all might be able to point to that example. But really, what Rutgers has done, I don't know that we can point to some other institution that has taken the time and invested the resources, as Dr. White said, to investigate its own history and really invested in this way. And so my question is, and not to put any more pressure on you folks as you just finished this landmark project, but how do other universities how do we publicize it more? How do we make this example readily available to other universities which really have similar work to do? And then, of course, going forward, because you all seem to allude to this, and I'm always on the entrepreneurial lookout for more work for the press to do. what other sort of potential projects might come out of this, not on such a tight time frame, but going forward. There's much good scholarship, I'm sure, to be done. So thank you all, and that's basically my question.
Well, I mean, thank you for that, Peter, and again, thank you for the work that you put in getting this off the ground and out. I do think so. Deborah and I, part of this, which we haven't talked about, it's not just the work that we did to bring the volumes to fruition. It's actually being asked by other universities to come and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
There you have more time that we're spending. And actually Alexandria, Maya, and Kendra were both, and Jesse as well, have done that work as well, right? Because it's just too much for two people to continue to then go and show up at everything. So that's one way we're getting the word out, and we're offering this project as a model and example to other universities that are just starting to think about it. And particularly places like Deborah and I were in conversation with UChicago, right? Because their project might not necessarily be solely focused on slavery, but rather discrimination, of around the communities that the UChicago is placed within, housing discrimination, and all sorts of research that they promoted that was around scientific racism. So this work actually serves as a model for how to do those types of research projects that reflect, the 20th century that I just said I didn't like, but I do like. I just challenged by it. So we continue to do that work of talking to other institutions. We talked to Rice University, who also has projects. But I think what we've said time and time again really is that to do this work, your university has to be completely on board with it. And they have to completely be on board with the support and the resources, because you can't do this work without that, right? What I'm hoping is that students become interested in New Jersey history, which is deep and vast, from the colonial period to, through the more contemporary moment, and have postdocs come and do work, and have graduate students come and do work and publish more about this history. I can see that happening. I hope that that's happening. But really the work is to continue to talk about it and share what we've done, how we did it, and to just offer advice to other institutions that are starting this work.
Right. Thank you.
I also, I'd like to add to that the Scarlet and Black Project is now going to, we're not just folding up our suitcase and leaving, but we are going to be absorbed into the Institute for, Global Social and Racial Justice. It's a long, Rutgers really likes to have these really long titles.
Someone, Erica can type in the title.
Yeah. So, and what we would like to do with that, there's a lot more to do with the with the archive, an awful lot more to do with the archive. It hasn't been the case that Rutgers has, particularly Rutgers New Brunswick, probably not too much with Rutgers Newark or not Rutgers Camden either. They haven't really reached out to the community and tried to forge any kind of relationship. But one of the things that we've noticed with the project in Scarlet and Black is that we've had so many alumni who are all over New Jersey begin to contact us and want to share some of their papers. So what Scarlet and Black has done, I think, is opened up an avenue whereby the community in New Brunswick, Rutgers alumni, can connect with Rutgers in a way that they want to. And hopefully in that way, we can build all kinds of alliances. We have incredible alumni and they are all over the state. In fact, they're all over the nation. And when we talk about helping our students, when we talk about bonding or creating some sort of bridge between, say, the education department or Department of Education here at Rutgers and in New Brunswick, there are all kinds of ways that we can forge relationships with the communities in which Rutgers, the communities where Rutgers abides. So it just seems to me that Scarlet and Black has helped to lower some of the barriers between town and gown. And hopefully, we can always give people, well, this is what we're interested in, and show them how serious we are. Not only will they buy Rutgers University press books, but then they'll come back and they will give back something to the community by way of maybe helping Rutgers students, by way of internships. They're just a variety, by way of helping teach New Jersey history in the public schools. I think that we've opened a portal, so to speak, and hopefully Rutgers, with this new Institute for Global Social Justice, will walk through that portal.
I will just thank you, Deborah, for that. I will just add that, or maybe reiterate that this project will be enveloped by the Institute for the Study of Global Racial Justice. Thank you, Erica. Erica Dunbar, another distinguished professor from the history department, will lead and direct that institute. And I think we should all be looking out for notice in the fall when they launch their new iteration of the project and announce some incredibly exciting initiatives that they are producing and sponsoring that really do take what we've done and sort of run with it. So I'm really excited for that, for sure, that to open up.
Yes, and it's so fitting, the legacy of Scarlet and Black. It's great to know that it will continue to endure at Rutgers University and throughout New Jersey. I do want to note that one of the questions was already addressed, but we did have Dr. Felicia McGinty, who's our Executive Vice Chancellor for Administration and Planning, ask about the next phases. So we addressed that, and thank you so much, Dr. McGinty, for your support in the planning of the program and in the project as a whole. So now I would like to move on to another question that we have from Dr. Boyd, Dr. Professor Boyd, I was going to say. I'll let her unmute her mic and feel free to ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, especially to Dr. White and Dr. Fuentes. My question is if you have any advice for managing your own research that you need to do to write your own book, but also engaging with community work or scholarship that will benefit the Black community, or just for juggling so much at once while you have the pressure for your own research.
Get tenure first.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. I joined the project as Dispossessed Lives came out. I was, up, as Deborah knows, as a mentor and as a colleague, that that work is all consuming in your first few years on the tenure track. And so I would just say, don't spread yourself thin, and that keep your eye on that prize. Once you have tenure, you have more flexibility and you have more time and resources to give after that. And I think, some people can do this, and I haven't been able to multitask very well. Some people are very good at it and, have been able to engage in community work alongside their scholarship. But if you're someone that can do that, and actually, Kendra, I've witnessed the way in which you multitask with excellence. I would just say, make sure that it's manageable and keep your book, at the forefront of it.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I always tell people to pay it forward, but do it after tenure. Um, even with taking on this project, my last book was published in 2017, but I had pretty much finished it. This is Lost in the USA. So when I was approached to do this work on Scarlet and Black, I was putting in a huge project to bed. And so I knew that I would have time. It's almost as if, okay, you know how I'm sure you've been on the job market and they ask you, well, what's your next project? My goodness, you haven't even finished the first one, you know, but everybody's asking you, so what are you going to do next? Well, this is what Scarlet and Black, it was like I was putting this to bed and then I was just handed another project. So I also knew when I said yes that I was going to have the time. But the other thing that that I think that one of the things that helped me with this project was the support that we got from the university, and they did not just expect us to do this and teach and mentor and do everything. So in terms of negotiating for some time off was something that I was sure to do. And I think that whenever you take on a project for the university, that you need to negotiate. Women in particular are notoriously reluctant to negotiate for time off. And my feeling is, well, they can say no, but then, they can't ask you. Even this morning at the faculty senate meeting, President Holloway talked about how minority faculty and women are usually put upon to do all kinds of service work, and without compensation. So that's something that I think that we have to be aware of. Pay it forward, do it after tenure, and negotiate.
Absolutely. So we have another question. I'm going to read this question. It's from one of our contributors to the volumes, the digital archive, the project from the beginning, and now Dr. Adams, Beatrice Adams. She's asking, as trailblazers in your fields, I'm wondering how this work may have shaped the questions that you bring to your own research and teaching. So how, what are there any questions perhaps of archives or documents that have been different or framed differently as a result of your work with the project in your own research or perhaps in your approach in the classroom?
Want to go ahead?
Well, I will speak just briefly on it. I think that doing work on African American women, Black African American women are just not in the archives in the same way that white men are, or even white women. We're just not there. So one has to use all kinds of other techniques, and one has to use sources rather creatively. And it doesn't mean that it's any less valid. It just means that we don't have the luxury of having somebody's diary to read, and that's in many ways what some of the documents that I'm sure our students, graduate students, came across. They're not going to tell you how they're feeling. For example, when you're reading the Forerunner generation, and they're not going to. There's no diary that's going to say, "Well, I felt lonely." But you can gather by, okay, they're joining here, they're going here, they're going here. What is all this movement about? So one just has to. I think I look at a source differently because of the work that I do that involves African American women.
mean, I would add to that in thinking about teaching. We have this course that was instituted in the history department a few years ago called the History Workshop. And it's for sophomore majors to get them to get their hands into archives and to teach them what it is to do historical research. So there's that class that sort of is an organic template to bring in the material from Scarlet and Black and to get students at Rutgers to be excited about where they are. I mean, Rutgers students, it's your university, right? So it's a way to get you, to be a stakeholder, to be excited, to uncover information that has not yet been brought to light. I know both Jesse and Deborah taught classes on this material, and from volume 3 have generated publications from undergrads on research they did in the seminar. Jesse was able to teach a class that taught students how to use a digital format to create exhibits, public facing, right, with the material from the volumes. I think that is work that is so important. It brings the relevance of history as a major to students, that this skill can be used when you get out, right? Because so much of our interface is digital. I think that there's that the work is just rich for possibilities with curriculum development and to bring students in contact with these archives. And I would just add, in terms of my own work, I think obviously working on the first volume in colonial records, like one thing I would giggle a bit when students that were training to be 20th century historians would encounter the colonial archive and say, wow, this is really hard to read. And I'm like, yeah, imagine this is the work, but they came to it and they worked with it and they learned how to do it. So it was really kind of wonderful to just watch them grapple with all of the erasures and silences and the detective work they did to, bring people like Will and Sojourner Truth to, back onto campus in powerful ways.
Yeah. In fact, we have in volume 3, we have 2 single authored articles written by men, white males, who went into the archives and looked at the materials that we had in our special collections, and they have written pieces, and it's just absolutely amazing how their eyes were open and how receptive they were to this material. Yeah, so they are. It really makes me feel good to know that we have undergraduates who are doing this work as well.
Thank you for that. So we have a two-part question coming from another one of our great contributors, Joseph Williams. He writes, Dr. White and Dr. Fuentes, thank you for your leadership and mentorship. I have 2 questions. What resistance did you encounter in leading this work? And what was one of the most surprising things that you discovered about the presence of Blacks at Rutgers?
To be honest, we didn't have any there was very little resistance. I mean, if there was, I'm really have to search. We really had very little resistance. I will say that if there was anything that was resistant about it, it was just that the bureaucratic structure of Rutgers is such that by the time you fill out 10 or 15 forms, and it goes through this, right, and then you find, oh well, they changed the process here, so that, but basically I don't know about you, Marisa, but I can't remember too much resistance. And the second part was
surprising things discovered about the presence of Blacks at Rutgers.
Oh wait, I did find one thing that was resistant. One thing. and that is something current, and I won't go into detail, but there seems to be some pushback on a marker. And I think we'll just put that in there for the record. There are, when you start to tell, when you're engaged in truth telling, there are some families, and particularly at Rutgers, they don't want it known that their predecessors were slave owners, or they did some not so nice things. So in that regard, we've had some resistance there. But I forget what the second part was.
The most surprising thing we found.
The Klan.
Pardon?
I thought the Rutgers Klan, and it wasn't associated with Rutgers. It was called the Rutgers Klan, but I was just amazed that in the 1920s, New Brunswick was a hotbed of right wing.
Did Deborah freeze? I think. We can't hear.
Yes, I think she did. But if you want to go ahead, I'll try and figure out the technical issue.
I would just, say that I think that the most surprising thing to me was the students' discovery of Will, the enslaved man that literally laid the foundation of Queens College. The relationship between Rutgers' early trustees and presidents and those families who owned family members of Sojourner Truth. And I think Deborah and I talked about this, about being on campus for a number of years, obviously her more longer than me, but walking around and not really putting thought into what we were walking around, and the history that I had no idea when I started what would be found, and the deep ties to slavery and that history. So that was really, really surprising.
So we are having a little bit of a technical issue. I just kind of saw a surge happen in my own home. So I think that that may be why. But if you'd like, we can just go ahead and move on to our next question. And then we'll give Dr. White an opportunity to reconnect.
Her power just went out, she just said.
Oh, okay. So maybe we can speak to this last question and then maybe wrap up from here. So our last question comes from Dr. Maya Carey, who was a part of our panel this afternoon. And so I'm going to give her an opportunity to unmute her mic and ask her question to you.
Hello. I would like to echo everyone's comments in the chat to thank you, Dr. Fuentes and Dr. White. I know she's not here right now, but just to thank you again for the leadership and the mentorship. It's been an immense honor to be part of this project. So my question is, it's about stories that have yet to be told. So volumes 1 through 3 are very expansive, but obviously we can't cover everything. And you started to gesture towards this in the beginning about saying that there's more to say about slavery. But I wanted to know, are there any stories that remain untold, or stories that we kind of gesture to or mention that haven't fully been told yet, that would be interesting for another scholar to take up?
Thank you so much, Maya, Dr. Carey. Also, thank you for your hard work in the last volume. I honestly think, and I hope that we've conveyed this, this was a lot of work. It took a lot of research, but it also was not exhaustive, right? And all of the volumes, there are things that could be delved deeper into. My sort of most obvious example is the slavery, the volume that focused on slavery, and particularly I'm still haunted by the women that I want to say, Jesse can correct me if I'm wrong, but that Jesse and his group found of the women that were sold south during the period of gradual emancipation, and those women who sort of, got tricked into giving up their freedom and that of their children to be sold south with the promise of eventual freedom in Louisiana, knowing that that is the deep south. And that, so yeah, Phyllis and Dinah, I'm still haunted by those stories, and that there were a lot of those records that, showed these women sort of signing off their lives. I would like to know what happened to them. If anything, it seems to be something that could be followed. And I'm thinking about, I'm sort of answering the other question that just came up about, what things might we do to kind of redress this past, but some of the descendants, of those women are virtually probably still living. I would love to have that work be done, whether it's an academic article or something, because it's important, right? I think that, but I would also say this too, particularly in volume 3, that book was so difficult because of the time period and the geographies and institutions that we had to cover. And in many ways, the first 2 volumes were about New Brunswick, and about the history that was located, on this sort of main campus. So what we tried to do with that volume is to shift the spotlight to the campuses that did not or do not typically get the attention that New Brunswick gets, or even the resources that New Brunswick gets, by understanding the histories of Camden and Newark and the students there. And I think in that regard, much more can be done to tie Rutgers, Newark, and Camden together in a student movement history that we perhaps scratch the surface of, right? And I think that work can still be done.
Well, welcome back to us, Dr. White. I don't know if you wanted to make any other comments on that, but we do have one more question here, and perhaps maybe you can combine your comments from the last one with this one. I'm going to give Nathan Jeremy Brink the opportunity to unmute his mic and ask his question. Thank you so much.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you so much for this amazing work. It's so helpful. And just the question is that in view of all this work, we've got new measures in New Jersey, S322, and other states like in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. We've seen municipal efforts like in Evanston, Illinois, to have forms of redress and reparations. I'm the historian at New Brunswick Theological Seminary, and so working with churches around some of these reparation questions is my work. The question is for you as for Rutgers as a state university who's now done this work, do you have any insights about the possible role that some of this fact finding that has already been done could lend to the work in a state like New Jersey in terms of broader policies? Given how expansive your fact finding and your background is on this score.
Deborah, I'm gonna pass that to you.
Sorry if that's an impossibly big question.
Well, in some ways it is, because what we've done is that we've given Rutgers the history and the foundation on which to build, particularly through maybe through the Institute for Global Social Justice, maybe through other departments at Rutgers. But we've given them a reason to do restorative and recuperative and reparations work. So in essence, when people ask, well, why are you doing this and why are you doing this? For those who want to, it's because, Rutgers Rutgers benefited from people like from this minority group, or Rutgers has been living off of the labor or benefiting. So this is our payback. So in that regard, we've certainly given them the wherewithal to say, this is why we need to do this. It's not like, well, sometimes it's someplace and, in the history of Rutgers. I mean, we have the specifics. We have the facts. And that's just the beginning of them. But I do think that Rutgers as the state university needs to help the people of the state, and therefore it should be able to help. I mean, you look at minority communities and the educational system, it sucks. Not in every case, but it's certainly not up to the same quality as that in so many other communities. And I think that a state university ought to be committed to helping Black people in particular in the communities in which they live, and particularly in the communities and in the state. We now have a university that has a hospital that has incredible resources as far as health is concerned. We ought to be reaching out as the university, and we can point to how Rutgers benefited from the poor health of Black individuals. So that's in terms of reparations. I don't have a whole lot of specifics, but I do know that and feel that as a state university, it should be dedicated to helping the people of the state. And certainly we've given Rutgers enough evidence to begin that work on the basis of what was done in the past to Black people.
Well, I just want to give both of you an opportunity to say any last remarks or final comments before we close. It's kind of bittersweet at this moment, our virtual symposium. Do you have anything you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I think I would have, I know with the pandemic, we weren't able to gather and to really be in each other's company and really feed off of the energy that an event like this usually gives. So I'm sorry. My final remarks is that, even though I'm really sorry that we haven't been able to come together in person, I'm really pleased that we were able to do this. I want to thank you, Alexandria and Jesse, for really, really making this possible. And I also want to really thank university administrators for having the confidence and the foresight in us to complete this work. It, to me, has been incredibly enriching. And it's been an incredible experience. For everything that I may have said, for all of the angst that I have had, I am so proud of this work.
I would just echo everything that Deborah has said. And thanks, Alexandria and Jesse, that for me and Deborah to just show up to this symposium, having everything in place has been amazing. I'm so thankful for the work that you did. And I share all the thanks to the administration, the students, the librarians and archivists, and the press. And I share the pride of it. I think we all should be proud of this work.
Yeah.
And how it's turned out, and how it's a gift to the university.
Yes.
Thank you so much for those remarks. This has been a wonderful conversation, the perfect note to end on. So let me just echo by saying thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to those in the audience who are tuning in from all over the country. It has been a tremendous honor for me to begin my career with this Hallmark project. So thank you for everything. And again, thank everyone for joining us tonight. We will leave you now, but we will be here coming back in the Institute for Global Racial Justice. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.